Let's open up the Epic Hero Series 4-inch figure of Bo-Katan Kryze.
Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. As a Star Wars fan and collector of action figures, I'm really excited that there are not one but two action figures of Bo-Katan Kryze turning up on New Zealand store shelves. I recently acquired and opened up the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch figure of Bo-Katan, the Plazir-15 version, VC339, and lo and behold, I also found the Epic Hero Series 4-inch series figure of Bo-Katan Kryze, aimed at younger fans, but as a focus collector, I like collecting characters. I really wanted to add this Bo-Katan Kryze figure to my Bo-Katan collection, so I was really excited to pick up two Bo-Katan figures this week. And I do have the Vintage Collection figure on hand to do a bit of a comparison once I have this one out of the packaging, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take a closer look at the figure and the accessories out of the packaging, but first let's take a quick look at the backing card. As a Star Wars collector that's very familiar with the Hasbro main line Vintage Collection line of 3.75-inch figures, I really like that the packaging style for the Epic Hero Series 4-inch line is quite different. Very vibrant. It certainly does stand out on the toy store shelf with the vibrant colors. We have accents of blue and yellow, really bright, always catches my eye at the toy store. We've got a very nice, clear, readable Star Wars logo here at the top and a really nice illustration here of Bo-Katan with her helmet on, holding up one blaster there, and her other hand is just in behind the figure there. Really nice. I quite like that artwork there. We've got a very readable nameplate here that reads, of course, Bo-Katan Kryze. The series logo is a little bit hidden on this one. It's down the side. Epic Hero Series. We can see that it notes that these are 4-inch figures or 10 centimeters tall. The figure is nice and clear in a nice rectangular shaped bubble there, a little bit cut off by the nameplate, but we can see the two accessories. We've got a blaster pistol and the dark saber, which is really quite fun. Moving on to the back, again, that blue and yellow accent colors coming in really strongly, and instead of an illustration of the figure, we have actual toy photography here with the figure out of the packaging holding the two accessories, one blaster pistol and the dark saber. To introduce the character of Bo-Katan Kryze to younger fans, we also have a short blurb. A gifted warrior, Bo-Katan Kryze is a legendary Mandalorian who refused to align with the Empire's occupation of Mandalore, and that is repeated in a few different languages. The rest of the bottom of the backing card is the barcode, copyright text, all of that kind of stuff, but I just have on hand another Vintage Collection carded figure of Bo-Katan just to kind of see the differences in the packaging style. Now, it's kind of interesting. Of course, the figures are different scales. This one is a smaller scale, but the bubble is about the same height, but it kind of feels like we get more toy with this one because, of course, it is a 4-inch scale and the bubble is slightly larger. It's kind of funny that for us here in New Zealand, if I can get this one on sale, it comes in at under $10, whereas a Vintage Collection figure retails for about New Zealand dollars 30 to 38, depending on stockist and the character. So I can buy about 3 of these figures for about the same price as this one, which is very appealing for younger fans, perhaps shopping with pocket money, or perhaps you are an older fan with a budget and you just want some figures to display. This, I think, is a really good price point, and somehow I can see why this feels like you're getting more toy for the price, especially in the eyes of younger fans. The backing card, it is a bit smaller, but the figure itself takes up so much more retail space there, and I really like the vibrant colors. They really stand out next to each other on the store shelf. This one really does look like it's aimed at older fans. This one is for younger fans or for collectors on a budget, and as a Bo-Katan collector, I like both of them. So just as a quick little note, this isn't the first time that Hasbro has actually put Bo-Katan in a budget line. A little while back, we had that experimental sort of Black Series 6-inch line of budget figures during that plastic-free packaging era. And so I'm going to be really curious to see how they stand up, because if you take a cursory glance at the actual figure, it was very rudimentary. The accessories were fixed into the hands. She only sort of turns at the waist and at the arms. Very simple, very minimal in terms of sculpting. The jetpack does not come off, and she lacks a lot of paint. It even stops halfway through the gauntlets there, and there's just no painting there on the back. So I'm hoping that this line is a improvement in terms of, you know, offering well-detailed toys for a budget price for younger fans, because I wasn't really a fan of this particular line. I felt like for the cost, there were too many corners cut. So really keen to see how this one stands up. So let's get this one open. So now I have the Bo-Katan figure out of the packaging as well as the 2 accessories, so let's get stuck in. So at first glance, she looks pretty cute. I quite like the paint job on the helmet. We've got all of the kind of details that we should have for a Bo-Katan figure, so let's quickly go over them. Starting off with the helmet, the rangefinder is fixed. This is not articulated. It is slightly rubbery, so it has just a little bit of flex to it, but it won't be able to raise and lower. It's also not painted anything different. It's not sort of painted in a silver or black or anything like that. It's the same blue as the rest of the plastic of the helmet, but I have to say, for a budget toy line, the paint job on the helmet is really nice. Very nicely aligned. We've just got a tiny misalignment on the side, almost too small to notice really there, just on the black visor section here on the left side of her helmet here. But otherwise, the detail is really nice. It's, you know, iconic, very clear that it's Bo-Katan, and the rest of the painting on the figure is pretty tidy. Of course, the detail is a little bit more sort of reduced down compared to what we see in the vintage collection with that incredible high level of detail. So if the detail is a little less refined, then surely the paint should be able to match up very well with that. Something that I am noticing here is that we have a blue shoulder piece here, which should have the night owl emblem, the symbol here on her shoulder, and that is completely missing. It is not sculpted as maybe a raised detail there. It is simply a smooth shoulder piece, so that is unfortunately an element that is kind of catching my attention. The other side does actually have printing, which I think is unusual. So of course this is her latter appearance as we see her in the Mandalorian series, where she has her shoulder armor replaced with a new Beskar one featuring the Mythosaur signet, which is printed on with a nice sort of brilliant shiny silver against that darker Beskar sort of gunmetal silver there. Now we've also got that same Beskar gunmetal silver metallic paint here used for the chest plate, which does stand out nicely against the grey plastic used for her flight suit worn underneath. And we have that same blue color used for her gauntlet details here. Unlike that cheaper figure, it does actually wrap around both sides on the underside of the arm there as well. We also have that same blue color used for her shin armor, which of course doesn't go around the back because we've got that nice sort of strap detail going on there. That looks quite nice, quite well defined, follows along the sculpting lines. The last sort of painted detail we have is the sort of orangey reddish brown for her belt, which does go all the way around, but I do have to note it doesn't actually extend down to the holsters like it should. Theoretically, this sort of section here should all be painted the same as the belt here, but it is sort of just sculpted flat with the leg here, so it is the same plastic there. So a little bit of a reduction there in the paint details there, and I do think it's a shame that they don't have the night owl emblem there on her shoulder, considering they have printed on the other one. I think that's an important component of her outfit. But yeah, perhaps younger fans won't notice that. Perhaps they thought maybe the complexity of that design would get rubbed off. But I think it's good to see that they've got the Mythosaur one. Shame about the other one. So let's quickly go over the articulation, because of course this is a 5-point of articulation figure line. It kind of reminds me of the old Kenner action figures in terms of the points of articulation. We have the head a little bit stiff out of the packet, but she can rotate around. Of course, there isn't actually a head underneath. It's just a sort of a circle attachment there underneath, a ball attachment, so she can go up, down, side to side. You know, enough for sort of simple posing there. Now the arms are only articulated at the shoulders, so they just swing around. They can go 360 degrees. There is no articulation at the elbows or at the wrists, so her hands are fixed in this position. So if she's going to hold an accessory, it's basically going to go up and down. We can't sort of move across the body or sort of flex with the elbows there. Nice sculpting there on sort of the flight suit around the elbows. I like the sort of gathering of the fabric. We've got a quilting texture there. So there's some nice sculpting details, and she's not too sort of thick in terms of the actual sort of proportions. The arms look a pretty good sort of proportion to the rest of the body, and unlike the Kenner ones, they are actually bent at the elbows in a pre-sculpted position. Old Kenner sort of figures had very straight arms, so they just kind of had them straight down at the sides and would raise up and down. So at least we've got a little bit of a natural pose here. So even when the arms are down by the side, they don't look too awkward. The legs, though, they are straight. We've got a little bit of an offset stance. I often find that with that line on this Epic Hero series, when they kind of want to stand straight. The left foot tends to be just a little bit forward compared to the right, so it gives them a little bit of a stance, but they are pretty straight-legged. We don't really have sort of a bent knee stance on this particular figure. The Moff Gideon one does have a little bit more of a bent stance on the left leg, but we've got some really nice sculpting there. I do wish, actually, by noticing the kneecaps, the knee armor here should be blue as well, and those are the same there. So noticing a few things with that sort of reduction of paint, which is a little bit of a shame. I was hoping that this one would sort of really stand out. I know it's a cheaper figure, but still there are a few things that I don't think would cost too much just to do an extra step there. So of course we notice going over the figure that there's a couple of other things missing. Now she has a big peg hole here on the back because of course the Epic Hero series line is aimed at younger fans. There are a certain number of play features included in the line, and you will notice that she doesn't actually come with a jetpack accessory. So looking online, I can see that she is also available in a 2-pack with Moff Gideon, and those two figures do have jetpacks included in that 2-pack as a bit more of a deluxe offering. It's a shame that this standard figure doesn't include it because she does look a little bit odd without her jetpack here on the back where we've just got that peg attachment. But if you are a younger fan and you have other toys from the line, say the Sabine Wren, so you can see she's got 2 accessories on her wrist, and she also has a peg attachment point because she has a jetpack with that same attachment peg that should fit into other ones because we can swap the accessories over. This one's a little bit tight, but it does actually go on. I'm not going to press it in all the way, but yeah, so you can swap the accessories around, and you will notice that the Bo-Katan does have a peg hole in each of her gauntlets here as well. So again, you can see that the Sabine comes with sort of like a vibro knife sort of extra gauntlet attachment and sort of a bit of a hollow shield attachment here that you can pull off and pop them on other figures. So you kind of have these fun accessories that you can mix and match. That's less of a draw card feature for adult collectors. You know, we're probably going to be keeping our toys to a little bit more, you know, matching to how they appear on screen. So unfortunately for this one, having those peg holes in the gauntlets is a little bit of a drawback. I don't have anything to put on here, and unless I am able to track down that 2-pack, I can't find that one in New Zealand yet, I'm going to have nothing to put on the back to cover up this peg hole. So unfortunately she is missing her jetpack in this particular figure. But other than that, looking at her from the front, she does look kind of cool. And just thinking about the articulation, we'll just keep going. Of course, we've got very straight-legged attachment, sort of hinging there at the hips, a little less going towards the back, but pretty good going from the front. There are some vehicles available in the line, unfortunately not available in New Zealand, but she can get into quite a good seated position if you happen to have a cockpit or perhaps other vehicles, you know, that you can mix and match. She can actually sit down reasonably well. So overall, a little bit of a mixed bag on this one in terms of, you know, how well she sort of stands up to other figures. Just for a bit of quick comparison, the articulation, particularly sort of the hinge joint through the hips, reminds me very much of the Kenner style, the sort of rectangle here through the hips in terms of the articulation. And it makes me think of the retro collection that Hasbro does of sort of newly made figures and new characters that are sculpted to look like original sort of Kenner cards. And I do have the Bo-Katan one here on hand, but she is still in her backing card. So I thought it was kind of interesting to see that this one does actually look much more sort of reduced down in terms of the detail compared to this one. It's a little bit hard to show as a close-up because she's still in her backing card, but you can see there we've got that same sort of angular articulation there through the hips, and the details on this one are actually much more reduced, though I do notice actually more of a paint job here. Of course, this one does retail for more than this Epic Hero series one, but we've got added details with a silver on the belt. The holsters are actually painted, and we also have painted kneecaps, and we have 2 blasters, whereas the Epic Hero series only has 1. The rangefinder, although it is sculpted sort of much more closer and in line with the helmet, does actually have additional paint there. I can't actually see Night Owl symbols on either of the shoulders here, so that is an element that is missing, and also the chest plate on this retro figure is not painted any different to the rest of the grey flight suit. So I feel like that is kind of missing. It should really be more of a Beskar shiny metallic finish there. So this one again is kind of aimed more at adult collectors that are looking for that nostalgia hit, because the retro collection is supposed to kind of, you know, replicate the original Kenner style. We've even got sort of the weathering on the back end card to kind of, you know, make us think of our old Star Wars vintage Kenner action figures. But I thought that that was interesting to kind of compare the two, because there are a lot of similarities. Of course, this one is 4-inch scale, larger scale, so we could have, you know, a better sort of a level of detail like the printing here. Just a shame they didn't add that one there as well. So let's do a quick look at the accessories. Now, this is another element that I think is a little bit of a shame. She only comes with one blaster pistol, even though Bo-Katan uses 2. Most other figures come with 2, but I think that is because, generally speaking, I have found that the figures in this line come with only the amount of accessories that the figure itself can hold or be attached to. So she's got 2 hands, she comes with 2 accessories. So it's got a little sort of trigger guard there. It's nicely sculpted in terms of the detail. It's cast in sort of a somewhat silver plastic there. It's not painted, it's just cast in that plastic. So I'm just going to check that out in her hands. So unlike other figures, she does actually have a little bit of asymmetry in her hands, even though some versions of Bo-Katan figures have an extended trigger finger on both hands. This one, it doesn't have a trigger finger on any of the hands. She just has a sort of a classic holding grip that we see on a lot of toys. So I'm hoping, yes, it does look a little bit different, because if she's holding onto it, there's no finger going anywhere near that trigger guard. It's just sort of a cutout there floating in space. It does actually hold on to the blaster very easily though. Fits in there nicely, and it should be able to go in the other hand also. It's a little bit of a tight grip, but sometimes that's for the best when it comes to toys that are intended to be played with, so that they don't fall out during play. So she does actually hold that pretty nicely, but again, she doesn't have an extended trigger finger, so there's nothing to really sit in that trigger, but I guess they're trying to be accurate to the original toy. Of course, the holsters are sculpted as part of the leg. They're not to scale with the actual included accessory, and they're flat. There's no entry point. I cannot put them in there. So I'm just going to put her blaster pistol in her left hand, because she's got the Darksaber. So this one is actually really quite fun. We've got the Darksaber a few times in the 3.75-inch line, but this is the 4-inch scale for the Epic Hero series, and I really like the detail on the hilt. It actually feels quite fun to hold. It's got a glossy black paint job on it, and of course we've got black and sort of a white edge to it there for the illuminated blade. And it's a little bit hard to show on camera, but there is actually kind of a little bit of a texture sculpted into the black part of the blade. I'm not even sure the light can catch it, just to kind of give it an effect, because I know it kind of has a little bit more of an electricity kind of, you know, a little bit of a sort of an interesting sort of edge to it. Some of the toys, it's a very straight white edge, which kind of doesn't quite look quite right, but there is just a little bit of texture along the black section here, which is quite fun. So I'm hoping she'll actually hold this quite nicely. Yep, that clicks in quite well. She holds that very easily. So of course, a little bit awkward with the stance, because we only can move her arms at the shoulders. So she's kind of going to hold her weapons out in front of her in a little bit of an awkward stance, but that does make it easy for play. If a child or younger fan is sort of holding it in their hand like this, they're going to be able to sort of fight against other characters like that. So I compared it against the retro collection figure, and I've also got the vintage collection figure here on hand, the recently released Plazir-15 version. This one is VC339, and golly, you can already see a massive difference here just in terms of the scale. They look so different, don't they? Some of the figures that I've opened from the Epic Hero series, there is only a little bit of difference in terms of the height. These two look very different. This one is just not standing up just at the moment. So yes, vintage collection, which of course is the 3.75-inch scale, and this Epic Hero series figure is 4-inch scale, and there is a lot of difference there. They do come with very similar accessories. She just comes with 2 blaster pistols and a Darksaber, and she also comes with her jetpack here on the back. And of course, I'm not really going to be comparing the details. There is a stark difference between these two, because of course this one costs a lot more, but just in case you're interested to see how these two compare, this is what they look like. So I can already see a lot of detail. Like this painting on the helmet looks pretty cool, but there are some colors missing when I compare it to this one. We've got that darker accent color on the cheek and some weathering. There is no weathering or that accent cheek color on here. It is just the blue plastic of the helmet. And it's also a much more brighter blue, of course. It's not really sort of accurate to how she's appearing on screen. And we can see that night owl emblem there on the vintage collection shoulder there. There's obviously missing here. Interesting that the silver on the chest is so different. A little bit brighter on this one compared to the vintage collection figure. And I think it's kind of interesting. We can see the scale of the Darksaber figures, the Darksaber accessories. The blades themselves are actually very similar in length, but the 4-inch one is a lot thicker, and we can see the scale of the hilt is very different there. A much bigger hilt, even though the blades are actually quite similar in length. They do tend to kind of shorten the accessories a little bit for the Epic Hero series line, I have found. But yes, very interesting to see. So if I grab my little ruler, we can just check the height of the figure, because it is noted as being a 4-inch figure. So it's pretty close to 4 inches across the top of her helmet, but her rangefinder does sort of extend a little bit above the 4-inch mark. And of course the 10 centimeter line, she is a little bit taller than 10 centimeters. I'm finding that I think they're sort of sculpting them to be where the top of their head would be. So things like helmets and sort of Darth Maul horns extend a little bit more above the 4-inch scale. So just thought that that was kind of interesting, just checking the height there against a ruler there. So I'll just pop the vintage collection figure aside. Man, that was just, it's really interesting comparing the sort of approximate sort of matching figure from the mainline of vintage collection figure. So I do really like the fact that these ones stand up pretty well. She's got not quite flat feet. She does have sort of little heels there on her boots, but she does stand up pretty well, even holding her accessories. Now, when I was looking at her, it's something about sort of the gray of her undersuit gives her a little bit more of a basic toy appearance, especially when I compare her to the other one that I recently opened up from the same series too, the Darth Maul figure. This one I think looks absolutely fantastic, and to me he's not too different than some of the Darth Maul figures that we got back in 1999 with the release of the Phantom Menace. Especially his face is actually quite an upgrade compared to some of those older figures. I did a direct comparison in the video where I unboxed this Darth Maul figure, and the face is so much better, especially the horns. They are actually spiked. It's a little bit hard to show because they are small and spiked. And of course he's all black, so the color of his robes, it reads a little bit more accurately, whereas the gray of hers looks a little bit more like a basic toy. And I also have the Moff Gideon figure. You can kind of see how they're all about the same height, and they do look like a really good line when you start adding them all up. I'm just going to get Darth Maul to stand up straight there. Yeah, they look really cool together. If you're on a budget and you just want some action figures to put on your shelf, they don't look too bad, you know, in terms of the scale and the detail. They do kind of lose points when you put them alongside other sort of vintage collection figures. But I picked up all 3 of these for the same price as one vintage collection figure. So if you're looking for sort of just, you know, a little bit more of quantity over, you know, detail and quality there, then these ones are going to be really fun. As a focus collector, I was really happy that Bo-Katan was in this series. You know, anytime I can add one of my favorite characters in action figure form to my collection, I'm all for it. Of course, she's a little bit basic, but she wasn't very expensive, so being able to add a new Bo-Katan item to my collection is always a win. And I'm just having a lot of fun with this line. You know, I grew up with Star Wars action figures. I've got a whole room of Star Wars action figures now, and these ones won't be going alongside my main sort of Kenner / Hasbro 3.75 inch. They're the wrong scale, and they do kind of stand out a little bit. But I have to say, I do actually think these 5-point of articulation figures are a step up compared to that thankfully short-lived 5-point of articulation era that we had around the release of Rogue One and Solo, where we got sort of simplified figures. Some of them are very clunky by modern standards, especially compared to the vintage collection. So for young fans, I think these are great. The price point is very young collector friendly, pocket money level for a lot of children, or simply easy, especially with Christmas coming up. These are easy figures to buy for children. So much of a better price point compared to vintage collection figures. I still think it's funny that for us here in New Zealand, vintage collection figures are stocked in the toy store aisle alongside, you know, the plush toys and, you know, the Hot Wheels cars and things like that. And they just feel so designed for adult collectors. So I'm really happy to see Hasbro sort of filling a little bit of a gap in the market with this cheaper toy line. The details are there for the kids that want to play Star Wars action figures. And if you're a collector on a budget, then they look really cool. They've got all of the details that you need. I know they're not for everybody. They will never replace the vintage collection, obviously, but they're just fun. I just think they're fun and they look cool. This one, I think, as unfortunately, if I compare her to the other two, she is a little bit more on the reduced side, especially since she is missing her jetpack. She feels a little bit more incomplete compared to these two. I think Darth Maul is actually my favorite of the bunch. But yeah, she still looks cool. She's actually, you know, better in terms of the sculpting compared to that retro collection, and obviously quite a step down from the vintage collection one. But she's fun, she was cheap, and I think she looks really cute. And I probably will kind of forget the fact that she doesn't have a jetpack on because I'll have her facing forward, because by the looks of it, the deluxe 2-pack that comes with Bo-Katan versus Moff Gideon, the jetpacks do look quite big, I have to say. So they might actually look a little bit better. She might look better without it actually on her, to be honest. But yeah, this was fun. I really enjoy opening these ones up. They're just a lot of fun. Simple. They don't take themselves too seriously. They're just, in an essence, Star Wars toys, and I think that that's really fun. Just sort of takes me back to my younger era of sort of having Star Wars toys that you want to play with, you know. And of course, the simple paint job means that they're going to hold up well for lots of handling, and the lack of articulation means that you've got less points where they're likely to break, you know, with all of those small articulation points. Sometimes the vintage collection articulation joints can be very small, very tight, does always make me anxious. These ones stand up very well because they're only articulated at the hip. And I think the stances work quite well. You can see Moff Gideon's got a bit of a bent knee, Darth Maul also having a little bit of a bent knee. They look really fun, they look cool, really enjoying this line, and I hope we see more in the future soon. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars action figure and had a lot of fun checking out the details and doing a little bit of a comparison. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're an Epic Hero series fan, I recently opened up the Darth Maul figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Epic Hero series playlist. This is the way.